everybody. I'm jumping in on the series that Maureen and Rich have been doing on Christian socialism for a conversation with Rich about a practical example from our life on the Bruderhof that I think is especially relevant now. The crisis we're in has put a spotlight on many existing inequalities and injustices that socialistic ideas seek to address. And one of them is how our society treats the elderly.
Hey, Laura, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate
That's
it.
just fun. Yeah.
And as Laura said, one of the many tragic things we've seen as a result of the pandemic is the isolation of the elderly in nursing homes and assisted living facilities as the virus rampages. And that's been very depressing and sad to see. These folks who have contributed so much and lived such full lives have to end up facing the end of their lives alone with no one at their side.
Yeah, I mean, the way our society has treated its older people, like separating them from the rest of us, has always been bad. Like, it's always bothered me. It's really unnatural. But its awfulness is particularly apparent now. But it doesn't have to be like that, as Rich will tell you.
Right. So one of the many things that life in community allows is for the continued integration of our older members. And that's actually something we value very much. When I joined the Bruderhof many years ago, one of my assignments was to move next to an older couple, John and Gwen, who were in their 80s, because John sometimes needed help at odd hours. John and Gwen were just an amazing couple. Both of them had joined the Bruderhof as young people. John had been an insurance broker for Lloyd's of London, and Gwen was a teacher from Florida. They joined independently and then later married, but they never had children. Do you remember John and Gwen, Laura?
Yeah, I actually remember them really well. It's funny that you mentioned Gwen was a teacher because I actually didn't realize that. And because now remembering back, when I was in middle school, I think, I would often go to their house and read Gwen's stories, and she would correct my how I read certain words or how I read sentences. But I remember John really well because he had this awesome laugh. It was more like a guffaw.
No one will ever forget that.
Yeah, he was also a really great actor, right? Like, I always look forward to when he would do performances for the community.
Yeah, he was a total comedian. While I was taking care of him, actually, we got inspired to put on an excerpt from Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, and John was the hero who ended up killing himself. It was kind of like a ripoff of the Romeo and Juliet story, and he was the Romeo. And I still remember his stage death collapsing into a lawn chair because he couldn't quite manage the dramatic fall to the floor. You remember that one, Laura?
Yeah, I sure do. I am also remembering another classic was his rendition of that poem, Lochinvar. Am I saying that right?
Lochinvar.
Yeah. By Sir Walter Scott. And I think that one ended up with him and Gwen riding out on like the stick horse. Good time.
That was amazing. But anyway, my assignment basically involved showing up at their house around 9 p.m. We'd have a glass of port together. We'd chat for a bit, and John would generally end the evening by reading from a book of prayers that he had. It was always just a really nice family time together. And then I'd help him get to bed, and he'd call me a couple times during the night as he needed. Then later, Roxanne and I got married, right? And we were asked at that time to be a family with John and Gwen. And by the way, this is a fairly common arrangement on the Bruderhof for a younger couple to make a family with an older couple. Mm-hmm. And what it meant for us and of course for others is we would make John and Gwen breakfast, right? And then we'd get them where they needed to go during the day. And then we'd also hang out with them in the evenings. Often we'd invite other folks from the community over for conversation or stories. Because since John and Gwen had no relatives on the community and had never had any children, the community really was their family. Right. So they really enjoyed having us around, and really vice versa. Mm-hmm. But then not long after we'd moved next to them, I got a call at work that John had fallen. He'd had a stroke, we found out later. So I took care of him at home for the next week. I have a nursing background. with the help of other community members, and he also had daily visits from his doctor.
Okay.
Really sadly, he died a week after his fall, which was hard, but we were able to support Gwen during those following days, and also for the funeral, and it was just a very memorable experience.
Mm-hmm.
But then we carried on taking care of Gwen for the next 2 years. We had breakfast with her every morning, and then Roxanne would accompany her where she needed to go to whatever activities she had planned for the day. And then in the evenings, we'd sit around together until she went to bed around 9 p.m. She called it Quaker midnight. And then on weekends, we'd take her for a car, and we'd just go driving for hours in the Catskill Mountains, stop at diners. For her favorite was classic Coke and coconut fried shrimp.
Sounds good.
Go figure. She was tremendously excited when our daughter Frida was born, because obviously she never had children. And she just enjoyed every stage of Frida's development and considered herself a grandmother.
Right.
But then during the time we were expecting our second child, another couple took on her care. So we were no longer living next to her anymore, but she still remained part of our family. And we had her to meals a couple times a week, I would say.
Rich, that doesn't really sound though like the precisely ideal newlyweds life. I mean, there must have been kind of aspects that weren't the best or were a bit of a drag.
Well, yeah, I guess there were times on weekends or in the evenings where Roxanne and I would have enjoyed going out alone, as you can imagine.
Yes, I can.
But I would say in general, it was extremely rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think most people have this idea when you're first married that these are supposed to be your best years, where you don't have a ton of responsibility, you don't have kids, and you have plenty of energy to pursue your interests. But I had to think at the time, and I still think now, that, you know, if you say you believe in equality and justice, it's going to mean giving up the ability to do whatever you want when you're young. Because, you know, good health and energy are not equally distributed. And those who have it got to be willing to give of their time and their resources to folks who have less. And that's the bargain of life together, right?
Right. And it's easy to be for equality and justice when it doesn't cost you anything or get in the ways of your goals and ambitions. And that's probably the biggest hurdle to creating a just society, the idea that my wants and wishes are the most important. But once you've done away with that notion, it's just a lot easier to be available for the needs of others and find fulfillment and validation in that.
Yeah, I had to think often, like most likely anywhere else, John and Gwen would have been in an assisted living facility or a nursing home for the last year of their lives.
Yeah,
because they had no relatives really, and they would have been separated during John's illness.
Right.
But as it was, they lived in the same room almost until the night he died.
Wow.
And they were as much a part of the community as anyone else. So when people talk about quality of life, I really think that is what it is.
Right.
It's certainly not about monetary wealth, because I also know folks in their 80s who have plenty of money, plenty of real estate, but they have nobody in their corner. And, you know, they face the end of their lives by themselves. And that's, at least for me, that's not the way I want to go out.
Yeah, I certainly don't either want to go out like that. But hey, Rich, maybe one of your kids will come and take care of me when I'm old. Or Branson will take care of you.
I prefer not to think about it at the moment, but maybe we'll get there.
It's good to be young.
It's good to be young.
Anyway, in the next video, Rich and Maureen are going to talk about resources that you might find valuable if you want to learn more about Christian socialism. But Rich, we should do this again sometime. This has been great.
This has been a lot of fun. Let's do it.
Great. All right. Well, over and out.